with me to preview all the fun in windy Wellington is the BBC's chief cricket reporter Stefan Schemmelt and also chief cricket commentator Jonathan Agnew. Aggers, first of all, hello to you. We've had a few days to reflect on that first Test match. What have you mused on in the intervening time?
Well, I obviously fretted a bit about Ben Stokes. It wasn't good to see him take himself out of the attack like that, and we know what problems he's had with injuries latterly and the impact that's had on him, and of course the whole balance of the side. But happily he appears to be fit and raring to go. I'm sure Stefan's been watching him in the nets in Wellington. That's important. I think you've got to keep Stokes on the field. And I've been intrigued by New Zealand, really. All the build-up before that first Test match was obviously based on their extraordinary performance in India, and people were talking about them being favourites, and I think they certainly were favourites for this series before that Test match, no doubt about it at all on the back of that. But they had a shocker, really. Drop catches, lackadaisical batting. There was a lot was wrong. Tim Southee, he looked undercut. Really, he looked like the man that he is, a man in his last series, and so I think they have all the problems. Jacob Bethel obviously batted nicely in that second innings. It was without being harsh. It was kind of a pressureless situation, really, with England only needing a handful of runs to win. But it's a nice opportunity for him to get out there and just get a few runs in the bank. And he looked the part. I like the way that he left the ball alone in the first innings when he was doing a little bit. So England really they had a terrific performance, and all the pressure's on New Zealand.
Yeah, Stefan, well, take us to Wellington and tell us about your journey from the South Island to North. I saw a little bit on social media, and also remind us what happened the last time that England visited Wellington.
Yeah, the last time England were here, an all-time classic, that one-run defeat by New Zealand. I had to be reminded that England declared in that game. I remember that they'd enforced a follow-on, so they became only the fourth team in Test history to lose after enforcing the follow-on. I'd completely forgotten they'd declared in the first innings. But there was that amazing finish, wasn't there? Jimmy Anderson belting Neil Wagner for 4, completely unexpected. Then there was the bouncer from Wagner that England thought was a wide. It wasn't called wide. That would have tied the scores. And then Anderson was caught down the leg side. An amazing Test match, a real privilege to be there. You described Henry Wellington as windy. Aggers, the pilot, will know all about that. Yes. I didn't fly in. I believe that David Boone, the match referee, didn't have a very good time on his flight into Wellington. I was told this story by Ali Martin, the Guardian journalist, that Boone hates it when they're flying into Wellington. He feels like he's always taking his life into his own hands. I think it was a bit of a bumpy landing. I drove from Christchurch up to Wellington, got the Picton ferry. I took Aggers' advice. I drove through Kaikoura, had some lunch at a fish shack overlooking
the sea. The whales?
Saw some seals on the rocks. Didn't see the whales, saw the seals, which I was pleased with. But no, didn't get didn't get the whales. But didn't have to undertake that flight. Just a stunning ferry crossing from Picton to Wellington. The sun's been shining. It is breezy. The pitch is green, or at least it was yesterday when we first got to the ground. And then there was little brown patches starting to appear today. So I do just wonder, as the game progresses, with the sun out and the breeze blowing across the ground, how that pitch is going to change. Found out today that New Zealand are unchanged. Yesterday, Ben Stokes told us England are unchanged. So we go again. England looking for or with the chance for a first Test series win in New Zealand since 2008. And that's remarkable itself. They've won in Australia and India since they last won a Test series here.
Well, let's hear from the England captain. Here's Ben Stokes chatting to you on the eve of the match, Stefan.
You're unchanged for this week. How straightforward a decision was that?
Yeah, it was. Obviously last week was, we had to go with that through the unfortunate circumstances that happened with Coxey in the build-up in Queenstown before that first Test. But, on reflection of that game, that's what you do. You finish a game and then you reflect, and then when it came to deciding around the team, me and Baz just really liked how the team was set up throughout that game. We batted all the way down to 10, Bryden Cast coming in. We had all bases covered with seam bowling options and obviously Bash. So, it was the other way around was obviously to bring Molly Robinson and take the gloves, but we really liked the makeup of the team that we ended up stumbling across through unfortunate circumstances. So we've just gone with the same team again.
You suggested that in the future Jamie Smith will come back in, Ollie Pope goes back up to number 3, but I guess how much of a chance has Jacob Bethel got to give you a bit of a headache?
Yeah, well, that's what you want. You want competition for places. He's obviously in his short international career so far impressed a lot of people, and me and Brendan being two of those. He's got the desire to represent England in all forms of cricket, and I think he's been rewarded by his undoubted talent by being rewarded that 2-year central contract. So he's another player with an incredibly high ceiling, and I'm sure someone that will see a lot of an England shirt in the future.
You'll know that Chris Woakes' overseas record is something that sort of hangs over him. What about the impact that he made last week when Kane Williamson was getting stuck in? Those 2 wickets in 2 balls really blew the game open.
Yeah, look, I think those comments are obviously something that have been spoken about for a while, but I know, and we all know the ability that Woakesy has, with both bat and ball. He really changed the momentum of that game for us. Taking those 2 balls and 2 wickets in the space of 2 or 3 minutes just completely changed the whole complex where that game was going. So to have someone like that who you can just trust to be able to deliver a job that you want whenever it is in the game is amazing. And obviously having the sort of the compliments of Bryden and Gus at the other end, sort of being used as like an enforcer when we need to, allows Woakesy to be able to go away and just do his thing, which is just being incredibly accurate, incredibly skillful, and someone who I think with the experience of overseas cricket has just got better.
Have you seen anything different in Chris in playing overseas and being able to execute those skills maybe that he wasn't able to do previously?
I'm not sure. I just think just belief in himself, belief from myself and Brendan that he's not just someone who's going to be playing in England. Someone with his skill level should never doubt themselves wherever they are in the world. He's an amazing cricketer, and he has been for England for a long period of time, and it's great that we're now seeing his ability in England transfer over to obviously Pakistan and now New Zealand.
Zach Crawley's got an unusually poor record against New Zealand for a player of his quality. Why do you think that is?
Some guys have bogey teams, some guys have teams that do really well against. But look, Zach's been in incredible form for us over the last 18 months at the top of the order with Ben Duckett. Those two have been such a successful pairing for us at the top of the order that they go out there with a mindset of putting the opposition bowlers under pressure straight away and not allowing them to settle in and just bowl line and length like opening bowlers want to. But look, we're 1 test match into a series against New Zealand, but over the last 18 months Zach's been absolutely phenomenal for us. So yeah.
You guys have made a habit of winning the first test of an away series. Why do you think it is that you've been able to start so well and hit the ground running?
I don't know, that's a question just gets made up from results, I guess. Don't know.
And chance to win a series now here, and expecting a response from New Zealand after they weren't at their best last week.
Yeah, look, I mean, we played good cricket as well. We played 3.5 days or 3 and whatever days it was of very, very good cricket. We can't be blamed for the drop chances from New Zealand, but we made them pay. And look, we know that New Zealand will come back hard this week. They're a team who pride themselves on that. We definitely won't be taking any backward steps and taking into account how anything unfolded last week. We know we've always got to be on our A game against whoever we come up against. But yeah, look, we'll be going out there and hopefully trying to wrap the series up and go home with a series win.
Bowl the overs a bit quicker?
Can't.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Well, Ben Stokes seemed in cheerful spirits, and why wouldn't he be? Aggers, first and foremost, any surprises at the announcement of an unchanged team for this test?
No, I think you win it. The only thing it could have done perhaps is if one of the quick bowlers had pulled up a bit sore, but they won in under 4 days. They weren't necessarily hard pushed, I don't think, but that could have been the one change. They got the spinner in there, and interesting to hear what Steph was saying about the pitch. It might become a little bit uneven, maybe. Just go from 15,000 miles away. It sounds as if that's possible. If it's green with some bare patches around, that's possible. But no, I think the thing about this, about Stokes and McCullum is that when when they do take a punt or when they back somebody, they do it to the hilt. And, he's talking about Zach Crawley there. Well, we all know a couple of years ago the struggles that he was having, and they very publicly backed him and backed him and backed him. And so likewise with Bethel, who was also, all the conversation, of course, before the last Test match. They back him. Ollie Pope keeping wicket. Although Robinson's arrived now, there's a possibility they could have done something about that. But no, they're happy with the way things are, and they do. It's very good for members of the team to have that sort of support. You're not looking over your shoulder thinking, I might not play next week or whatever it may be. You do get support in this team, and that's so. I think all of that put together illustrates why they've gone with the same 11.
Well, what about Stokes' fitness, Steph? Where was that concern when he stopped bowling in that final day in Christchurch?
No, he says he's fine. He said it's unusual for me. He said he was just listening to his body and applying common sense. Because with Ben Stokes, we've always sort of watched him from behind the sofa, aren't we? First there was the left knee, then he hurt his hamstring in the summer, and then when he limped out, or he didn't limp out, when he pulled up in the fifth over of his spell on what turned out to be the final day in Christchurch, straight away you're thinking, oh no, what's wrong? But he stayed on the field. I actually thought he was ill at the time because he didn't go off. Normally with an injury you'd expect a fast bowler to go off and get some treatment, but he stayed on the field, carried on conducting the orchestra, and he just said to us afterwards, I just got a little bit of stiffness in my back because we're on top in the game. I didn't feel like I needed to keep bowling. He's bowled in practice this week. In fairness to him, those 19 and a half overs he bowled last week were the most he's bowled in a Test match for 2 years. But we will still have an eye on him this week just to see how he comes through it, because England just could do with Ben Stokes putting together a run of injury-free Test matches. He hasn't done that for a little while.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's as you say, you're sort of always watching a little bit through your fingers. Let's get on to Zach Crawley then, averaging below 10 across 17 innings against New Zealand. Here's what Chris Woakes had to say about Crawley's form earlier on this week.
I mean, a lot of the time I always think these sort of stats that come out are pure coincidence. I don't think it's actually anything to do with anything really, other than, it's not probably a massive sample size, but at the same time, I suppose the more you play against the team, the more, especially I think that's the beauty of international cricket and why international cricket is so hard, is you come up against the same players regularly over and over again, and in the series, once someone gets the wood over you, it's hard to wrestle that momentum back. So I don't really know why that is. At the end of the day, I think New Zealand have got some very good opening bowlers, and he faces the new ball when they're at their freshest and they're at their best, and he's probably got some good balls in there. But I'm sure that will change over time.
Yeah, backing a player of his quality to put that record right.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen the quality that Zach has. I think opening the batting is such a difficult job to do in international cricket, that you are going to have occasions where you get low scores. But we've seen what Zach can do when he gets in. He's probably one of the worst batters to be bowling against in international cricket. So I'm sure that will change.
Aggers, it's a funny one, isn't it? I mean, sometimes you do have bogey teams, it feels like, and Zach Crawley certainly got one against New Zealand.
Yes, he has, and there is no real logical explanation for that, other than they do have good seamers, they always have had, and they're armed with a new ball, and of course Crawley looks to play positively. So as we know, he likes that booming off drive, often without quite getting that left foot where the technicians would like it to be, and that often therefore produces an edge caught in the slips. You can look at various areas like that, but I really am pushed to think that it's just kind of New Zealand, oh no, rabbit in the headlights time. It's just a combination of all of those factors. I think the fact that he is positive and he is looking to play those. He's looking to play the sort of shots that opening bowlers want you to play. He's looking to drive. He's looking to drive, not necessarily half volleys as well. Well, actually, as an opening bowler, you quite like that. It gives you more of a chance of getting them out, and so that again, I think, explains why he's had a poor run, but not necessarily against New Zealand.
It would be a mighty big surprise, Stefan, if England were to go for an alternative option. Let's be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it's not even in the conversation, particularly when you think what England are planning for, and that those sort of harder, faster, bouncy pitches in Australia will probably suit Zach Crawley's game. It's interesting today, after his net session, so the nets at the Basin Reserve are out towards one side of the ground. They're out of the bowl, if you will. But the players have to walk across the ground to get back to the dressing rooms, and so Crawley had his net, came back into the ground, still padded up, went and stood in the middle where he'll take strike and had a good look around, visualising. Lots of batsmen like to do that, but I can't remember seeing Crawley do that before. I mean, I sort of take issue with what Chris Woakes said a little bit, saying that it's got nothing to do with anything, or it can just be coincidence. Well, it's got something to do with something. Zach Crawley's played 17 innings against New Zealand and averages, less than 10, so that's a reasonable sample size. And like Agus suggested, we can take a decent guess as to why it is. Crawley likes to go hard at the ball. New Zealand have got very skillful new ball bowlers who nibble it around. They entice the drive. They challenge the edge, so you can see from a technical point of view why that might be. I don't know, from Agus, from your point of view as well, did you ever feel like there were certain players that you had the wood over that you could, I don't know, Viv Richards was one of yours, wasn't he?
Well, that's definitely the case. So there are batsmen who you get out regularly who you look forward to bowling at, and similarly, teams, grounds, players. I never got Mike Gatting out. I don't think that could come up. But I just do think with Crawley, I think we've hit the nail on the head. He's up against quality swing bowlers and seam bowlers, those who pitch it up, who put it in the place where he fancies scoring. But of course, the risk that he takes there, as we've said, the gamble that he takes is that the ball's not going to move very much. He's not going to nick it, and with this attack and the ones over the last 4 or 5 years for New Zealand, obviously they've had the better of him.
There's an argument to say if he was an overseas opponent of England, he would struggle very much against England, given the way that sort of English conditions and England bowlers operate. And that sort of brings me on to the next area, really, that I think would be good to look at, and that is England's bowling, particularly Brydon Carson, his contribution in the last Test match. 10 wickets that he took in that game at Christchurch. And Stephen Finn has written an article on the BBC Sport website all about county cricket and international Test match cricket can be quite different experiences in terms of fast bowling. You compare his record in first-class cricket, where his first-class wickets costing almost 50 runs each. At Test level, 17.1. I mean, it's a different world. It's been a really interesting few weeks for Brydon Carson's career, Aggers. And as a bowler, I mean, his stock has risen so much.
Yeah, it has. I mean, we talked about him last week, didn't we? When he bowled so well. I mean, he was very impressive in Pakistan. A lot of stamina, a lot of energy. He bowls a heavy ball. He bowls at a good pace. He bowls at a good length. We talked earlier about that. Batsmen do not want to get forward to Brydon Carson, but he bowls that fullish length. That again. It teases that outside edge for a batsman who's reluctant to get onto the front foot. Yeah, I thought Steve Finn's article was interesting, actually. A lot about when county cricket is played, championship cricket, that is, of course. The travelling, yeah, well, that's always been an issue, frankly. Going way back in the day, sitting in. Bowling a lot of overs, sitting in a car, driving for miles and hours, and then losing the toss and you're back in. All that sort of stuff. And that is one of the problems of championship cricket. Pitches, he talks about at some length there. Again, interesting that often the better pitches tend to be in the middle of the square. They're the ones that are used for high-profile matches. And often championship games are pushed out onto the extremities because they're not on television, and so those ones in the middle are reserved for 100 games and so on and the like and the blast. So there are a number of issues there. I think it is interesting, and in Test cricket, someone like Carson can just run in, bowl quick, bowl flat out. And again, in championship cricket, when you've got games on the bounce, and I suspect this is something that I did. I mean, you do tend to look after yourself a bit. You know that you're going to be bowling a lot of overs over the course of the next month, say, a lot of games, and you don't want to go and blow up early on, so perhaps you do look after yourself a little bit, whereas at a Test match, you go running in, you bowl flat out, and if you get injured, well, you get injured. That's part of the game, and certainly Cars going in hard with good strong action, big shoulders, and bowling that fullish length is a very dangerous prospect in Test cricket. And I think he won me over in Pakistan. I was not convinced about him before that Test series, but I certainly have been since.
It feels, Stefan, a little bit like the divide between those that perform at county level. I'm thinking of, say, Cook and Porter at Essex, and those that get the opportunity at Test level. The last few weeks of Test cricket overseas have not necessarily filled them with much optimism of getting those opportunities based on county cricket.
Yeah, I think if to talk about the difference between bowling fast in county cricket and Test cricket, then Steve Finn and Aggers are definitely your men. If you want to know about wicket keeping in the North Staffs and South Cheshire League, I might be on slightly firmer ground. But I think the vindication of England's selection policy is really interesting. And it's not like Carse was a complete novice. He's been around the international picture for a little while. He was picked in that COVID series, wasn't he? Or not the COVID, the one-day side when England had to pick an entirely new squad because there was a COVID scare. Carse was in then and he got his debut. So it's not like he has been plucked out of obscurity. There are other players who have been, younger players like Bashir and Rayan Ahmed and to a certain extent Jacob Bethel. So Carse did have a body of work behind him, but as we have pointed out, his first-class record was not at all remarkable. But what Finney has said in his piece, and I'd urge people to go and read it, because obviously Steve Finn knows all about the step-up between county cricket and Test cricket, and he is a man who bowled fast for England. It is just those slightly different skills. And I wonder if maybe with the passing of time, and I notice, Aggers, that you highlighted the fact that Finney was talking about the travel. Well, in reality, that's probably got better, hasn't it, from when you were playing more cricket than what they do, from what they do now. So that is something that has actually improved, but has the different skills, and I'm not talking about standard here, I'm talking about the difference in skills. Is that difference become wider over time?
I think they certainly are more skilled now. I think you have to accept that with what they can do. But I think with Carse, I think England have always liked the all-round package of Carse. You don't just get the bowler with Carse, you get a very good fielder, and you get a promising lower order batsman. So I think that's why they were keen to get him in and to bring him on, and he's fulfilled that promise.
Yeah, and it's encouraging, isn't it? It certainly is. And the balance of the squad that Ben Stokes spoke about, that having Carse at 10 really does offer immense depth to England's batting. So, in a moment, we'll talk about New Zealand and what changes we might see from their performance. But just a little reminder, the BBC has commentary of every ball of every match of England's women's tour to South Africa this winter. They've won the T20 series already 3-0, but a disappointing start to the ODIs. They lost the first game comprehensively. You can hear full commentary of the second match on BBC Sounds 5 Sports Extra and the BBC Sport website and app from 7:45 on Sunday morning.
You're listening to the TMS podcast from BBC Radio 5 Live.
So what about New Zealand then, Aggers? I think it's fair to say if they were as bad again, we'd be very, very surprised.
Yes, to be honest. I mean, that kind of answers that question. I mean, they just had I don't know what on earth happened to them, really. I mean, it's not a bad seeing ground there. Sometimes you play at various cricket stadia around the world, and it is hard to pick the ball up. It can come out of a brick housing background or the colourful crowd or something. But Hagley Park is not is not from my memory anyway. Well, something like that. It's just hard to sort of put a finger on it. Really, they just had an incredibly bad performance in the field and batting too. They just seemed to be, whether they got a little bit confused with whether they thought England would play and they're trying to match them sort of run for run and the pace of it. But there was some pretty slack batting in there as well. They were just well off it. I thought Ravindra again reminded us of what a good player he is. I mean, they have got good players. Kane Williamson coming back and playing in a way a typical Williamson innings. He's not a flamboyant player. He's a hard worker. Again, reminding everyone of what he can do. But they just. I think probably they'd have shut the door. Gareth Stead will have said, right, that's it. That is a seriously bad day at the office. We're not going to, and we're going to move on to Wellington. We're going to just put that one away and go out and play better. And there's a bit of pressure on Southee. I mean he'll play the whole series out. He looked low on pace, I thought, when New Zealand last came to England during that proper Bazball series, and Johnny Bairstow particularly really hammered him. You know, he's a good bowler, a wily bowler, but he does need to have that little bit of nip. And if he's lost that, he'll come nicely onto the bat. But he'll be looking to do better up at Wellington as well.
Steph, what's been the reaction in New Zealand to that first test?
What Aga said, actually, that it was almost a bit of an aberration from New Zealand, and surely they can't play any worse than that. There is pressure on Southee because he looked innocuous when the ball stopped moving. I think England have got a bit of a theory, actually, that they can get after him. If you look at the way that Brooke and Ben Duckett played him, Brooke hit him onto the pavilion in Christchurch. And there's a little bit of pressure on Tom Blundell as well, the wicket-keeper. And New Zealand did have options. There's other keepers in that side. Devon Conway hasn't been getting many runs as an opener. Could they have brought Will Young back in? But there aren't loads of options in the squad. Mitchell Santner has just come back in, the left-arm spinner. There's Jacob Duffy, the seamer, who is uncapped. And then there's Will Young, who was player of the series in India. But it's almost a little bit of a problem once they've taken Young out for Williamson, who obviously needs to play, how they get Young back in without affecting the balance of the side. One thing I was interested in when Tom Latham spoke today, and going back to the issue of the pitch, is that New Zealand, I don't know whether I'd say they haven't got a specialist spinner, because I think Glenn Phillips is more than a part-timer batting at number 7. He's an all-rounder, but he's not a fully fledged paid-up member, I would say, of the Spinners Union, not like in the way that Bashir is a specialist. The last test match that was played here, Nathan Lyon took 10 wickets. Phillips took 5 himself. And the Australian said, we were actually quite surprised at how much it bounced. And as I've already alluded to, I think this pitch is going to dry out over the 5 days. So I just wonder if Bashir, at 6'4" on a drying pitch that should offer some bounce, might be licking his lips, and that's what interests me a little bit about the New Zealand selection.
Yeah, we shall wait and see. Fascinating. What about this story then that we've seen in the last 24 hours or so? I know you spoke to Ben Stokes, Stefan, about Jofra Archer, his future, England's central contracts, and still this rumbling conversation about a guy that has played 13 test matches since he burst onto the scene in that summer of 2019. But still, we keep on talking about Jofra Archer, the test cricketer.
Yeah, and can you imagine the story if Jofra Archer ever does get back to playing a test match? Early 2021 was the time that he last played a 5-day game, and since then we've just wanted for him, haven't we? We've wondered and we've hoped and we've wished for him to come back, because that first summer, that Ashes summer when he played, was absolutely electrifying. Who can forget that spell that he bowled from the pavilion end at Lord's on his test debut? And then England have carefully managed him back to fitness. We've had so many false dawns, and now he's been in the limited over side since May without any problems. The fly in the ointment came with the IPL, and we wondered, there was a bit of a won't he go into the IPL because of the new rules around, well, if he didn't go into the auction, he'll be out for 2 years. So then we're thinking, well, if he plays in the IPL, there's no early season cricket at Sussex, so does that rule him out of the India series? And if he doesn't play in the India series, surely he can't go to the Ashes. But then Ben Stokes revealed that he'd had a message from Archer a couple of months ago saying Zimbabwe, ? Jofra was referring to that test match in May against Zimbabwe. Archer was targeting that as his test comeback. I think the IPL makes that unlikely now. It'd be madness for England to throw Archer into a test match after he's only been playing at the IPL. But when that India test series starts, there is 2 rounds of county championship matches that Archer could play for Sussex at the end of June. I wonder if that's the time we see a red ball comeback. If that goes well, is there a Lions fixture somewhere that England could fit Archer into as well? He comes back into the test match scene for the end of the India series, and that is his route to the Ashes. The only thing I would say is England are putting together quite a good battery of fast bowlers now, so does Archer even get into their first choice team?
Interesting. Ackers?
Yeah, I mean, I think what they've got planning-wise is if they can get 2 Ashes Test matches out of Jofra Archer, they would consider that worthy of the investment that they made, and they have made a quite an astonishing investment in him. Really, given his fitness record, he's really had a tough time, hasn't he? I suspect the IPL was his insurance for himself. As I say, the way that the rules around the IPL have changed. If he does get injured again, he at least rules out of red ball cricket. He's still got the IPL that he can go to before he finishes. And I mean, I've been a bit surprised that he's still plugging away at Test cricket, really, or with that ambition. It would have been very tempting, I would think, for Jofra Archer to say, "Look, I can't do this anymore. My elbow's not up to it, or whatever. I can't. My body will not let me play 5-day cricket. I'm just going to go off into the leagues." He could have made a lot of money just cruising around the leagues and playing T20 cricket, bowling 4 overs, and that would have done very nicely. So there's obviously been a very strong conversation between England and Archer, a lot of commitment from both sides. Actually, you have to say Archer clearly has shown that he is committed to playing playing Test cricket for England. But I think that's the target. If they just get 2 Test matches out of Jofra Archer in Australia on a sort of rotation basis, I think they'll consider that's a real bonus.
And just briefly, Stefan, Jacob Bethel gets a real stamp of encouragement, if you like, in terms of how England view his future.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Jordan Cox misses an opportunity and Jacob Bethel gets one, and now Bethel's got that chance to show that actually it's he who should be England's first reserve for their top 6 or 7 going forward. He looked obviously like a man with a lot of shots in that second innings 50 in Christchurch, which we know he is, but as Agger's rightly said, that was low pressure, that was perfect for him to go and play. I was actually more impressed with the way he set up in the first innings, where he was really challenged by Southey and Henry. Didn't look phased, looked like he had a defence, looked like he had a calmness that Ollie Pope would kill for at number 3. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him in Wellington this week, and presumably in Hamilton again in the 3rd test.
England bat first. Good pitch, and then you really can have a look to see what Bethel's prospects are at number 3, because it's such an important position. You have to. I think before that first Test match, you'd have to be accurate, and you're being honest by saying that the odds are against him. If he comes through, well, he's done really well. But the odds on him succeeding with his lack of experience up against a good attack, ball nibbling round a little bit, he would have to play well and probably beyond expectation. I think he did that. I think he did do that all the way around, as you were saying, Stefan. The way that he set himself up in that first innings in particular, that's what the number 3 is. In the way that the second innings 50, which people talked about, okay, but that could have been played anywhere in a batting lineup. Number 3 is hard work, and I think he showed that he has got potential for that in that first innings.
Not short of confidence either, because he spoke after that game in Christchurch and said, 1, I would have asked to bat at number 3 if they hadn't offered me, and don't forget this is a guy who'd never batted at higher than number 4 in first class cricket. And secondly, he said all the way through my career, every time I step up a level, I play better. I went to the 100, I played better. I played limited overs cricket for England, I played better. Now I've played a Test match, I've played better. How's that for confidence from a 21-year-old?
Good.
Yesterday, elsewhere, England's women lost the first ODI against South Africa pretty badly as well, Stefan. Beaten by 6 wickets, all out for 186 inside of 40 overs, and then South Africa chased it down pretty comprehensively as well. It's a strange old performance that after the T20 series. I was really disappointed, actually. I thought that England, filled with confidence, filled with this new renewed enthusiasm for the freedom and lack of inhibition, it just didn't seem to go their way. I mean, it's a little bit of a worrying sign ahead of the women's Ashes.
Curious place, I think, the England women's team at the moment. It often feels like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and they looked so good. Obviously, the World Cup was so disappointing. They put that to bed, or they look better in the T20 series when they win 3-0, and then some old frailties come out in that one-day series. It's hard to put your finger on where they are going into that Women's Ashes series. My concern for England is they often peak in between their biggest challenges, if you will. They do well in bilateral series, then they come to a World Cup or they come to an Ashes series, and pressure moments end up being really important, and where they fall down, it is a curious old time for them, and there's not a lot of time to get it ready, to get to their absolute best before that Ashes series starts at the beginning of next year.
It's
a
funny
thing. They
thing.
need to be at their best. Let's be honest.
And they do
need to be at their best to beat Australia, weren't they, in the Ashes? I mean, look, it's one day international. Yes, it was a poor performance. Let's be honest. But again, a bit like perhaps maybe New Zealand in this Test series. You do get some ups and downs in international cricket, and in a one-off one-day international that can happen. So again, they're going to be looking to play much better this weekend.
Yeah, I think the worry from England's point of view from that first game is that a lot of the frailties, as you say, Stefan, that we've seen previously came to the fore, and they cannot afford that against Australia. Inevitably, all the conversation will be about how they manage to build a little bit of form into that Australian series, because time and again we've seen this across the women's game in recent years. It tends to be the series in between times that don't give you much of a gauge, Stefan, about where England are as a side, and then you find yourself rather shocked into life when you play against an India or Australia.
Yeah, and that Ashes series is actually pretty big for the England women when you think of the leadership around that team. John Lewis as coach, Heather Knight has been captain for a long time now. They have not won a major trophy since 2017, and even if they were to have a change in leadership after that series, I'm not 100% sure where they go. Their succession planning in terms of the captain looks pretty wobbly. We're not sure that if Nat Siver-Brunt wants the job. You look around at the captains in the 100, and either those look not particularly suitable, so Tammy Beaumont and Amy Jones have done the job. Then there's overseas captains in the 100. That's why I say that Ashes series looks crucial, and even if England succeed in it, Heather Knight, is she going to be captain forever? Well, no, she isn't. Where do the England team go in terms of their leadership in the not too distant future?
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. It really is. And we will have all of the women's Ashes as well as the women's series in South Africa across BBC Sounds and 5 Sports Extra. Also available for us to listen to in its entirety is the continuation of the Test series between Australia and India. India winning that extraordinary Test match at Perth first up. They'll be filled with confidence going into the second Test at Adelaide. Aggers, it's everywhere you look, there's interesting cricket to follow. I can't wait to see what happens here.
Well, yeah, that's huge, isn't it? There's so much at stake there. Again, with England very much in the picture. The next main Test opponents, of course, are India. We're not going to overlook Zimbabwe completely, but that is a huge series. And again, the implications for Australia going into the Ashes after that. So there's an awful lot of stake in that series, and I think there is clearly more pressure on Australia than there is on India. That's a fairly obvious thing to say, having won that first Test match. But if the Ashes does mean so much, it means as much to Australia as it does to England, and if they're going to get turned over by India with 1 year out to go until the Ashes, there could be all sorts of things that could potentially, all sorts of wheels could come off that particular bandwagon between now and the end of that series. So yeah, I'm absolutely glued to that one.
Steph?
Scott Boland back in the Australia side as well. That's to replace the injured Josh Hazlewood. And he had a terrible time, didn't he, in the home Ashes? England belted him out of the series, really. He'd done so well in the home Ashes of 2021-22 when he tore England apart, and it was almost like his useless twin brother had turned up in England. England really got after him. But it just goes to show, doesn't it, where Australian cricket is at the moment. They needed an opener after David Warner retired, and they turned to Nathan McSweeney, a man who never done it in domestic cricket. Hazlewood gets injured, they go back to Scott Boland, and so England will really be hoping. I know, we're falling into that trap, aren't we, of looking too far ahead, of looking to the Ashes series. But India can do England a real favour over the next few weeks. Just keep punching holes in that Australian lineup. Labuschagne under pressure. Cameron Green's not in the side. When will he be back? Those pace bowlers are all pushing on into their 30s. So what can India do as a favour for England? And when is that ageing Australian team going to regenerate?
Interesting news from the India side as well, with KL Rahul keeping his place at the top of the order. Rohit Sharma batting in the middle order in his return to the side. And I guess it's a return to the scene of where India were all out for 36 in that series 4 years ago.
Well, exactly. I mean, it is interesting. I mean, all of those things that Stefan was saying. But I mean, Adelaide tends to be a very good batting track, doesn't it? I mean, again, if you happen to have one of those days where you nick everything, then yeah, you can have those sort of rogue performances. I am interested in Labuschagne. I mean, that innings that he played in Perth was horrible. It was just full of absolute misjudgment, incredibly jittery. He was like a rabbit in headlights, and he's a much better player than that. And there is obviously talk about his future in that side. And if, as Steph was saying, if India can just punch a few holes in that Australian brick wall, as it were, and maybe starting with someone like him, that would be immensely unsettling. If you were to lose Warner, obviously through natural means, and Labuschagne through lack of form, well, that's two big holes, and there might be some more amongst that bowling department too.
Bottom line, it's Jasprit Bumrah, isn't it?
Yeah,
he is the key man in that series, and
Loves
he's
being
bowling
captain
like
too.
a magician. Yeah, he's bowling like a magician at the moment. I saw one comparison, almost like a white. I saw one comparison. It's almost like a right-armed Wasim Akram with all the different skills that he's got as a bowler. Michael Vaughan the other day was saying he's one of the greatest fast bowlers of all time, and the things that he's doing with the ball at the moment, he had so many of the Australians on toast. But the big concern from England is he's due in England next summer. What might he do to the England top order as well? But yeah, Bumrah with the pink ball under the lights in Adelaide, can he continue to torment that Australian top order? Because at the moment he's bowling like a genius.